Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're stepping right into the middle of a high-stakes courtroom drama. And I mean a serious intellectual battleground that literally shaped how we think about creativity, literature, and even truth itself. Just imagine the founding father of Western philosophy acting as the ultimate unforgiving prosecutor. And who's sitting on the witness stand? Art and poetry. No, really. We're looking at Plato's theory of imitation, also known as mimesis, where he quite literally puts artists on trial. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth would one of history's absolute greatest thinkers want to expel celebrated creatives from his ideal society? It's a wildly fascinating and frankly surprising argument. So let's examine the evidence.
Okay, let's dive into this. The ultimate question driving this explainer is simple, but honestly, it's kind of shocking. Why did Plato want to banish artists? It sounds incredibly harsh to modern ears, doesn't it? I mean, we celebrate painters, poets, and playwrights as visionaries, but Plato, writing primarily in his foundational texts, The Republic and Ion, he saw them as a profound threat, a real danger. To him, art wasn't some beautiful window to reality. It was a dangerous illusion that actively pulled citizens away from the actual truth. But to really grasp this shocking premise, we've got to understand exactly what Plato thought art actually was.
And that brings us to mimesis. It's the Greek word for imitation or representation. See, for Plato, artists don't actually create reality. Nope. They merely imitate appearances. A painter, a poet, or a dramatist isn't producing anything fundamentally original in the universe. They're simply reproducing what things look like. They hold up a mirror to the world, sure. But think about it. A mirror doesn't create anything of real substance, right? Because Plato firmly believed that ultimate reality only existed in a higher eternal world of perfect ideas. This whole earthly act of imitation was, well, inherently flawed. And worse, it actively moves people away from the truth.
To make this abstract idea super concrete, Plato gives us his famous layers of reality. And he uses a very everyday object to explain it, a bed. Okay, step one is the ideal bed. This exists only up in that eternal world of forms. It's the absolute perfect ultimate concept of a bed created by God or a divine creator. Then we step down to step two, the physical bed. A carpenter takes some wood and actually builds a bed you can sleep in, basing it on that ideal, divine form. Finally, we step down again to step three, the painted bed. An artist comes along and just paints a picture of the carpenter's bed. Feel the rhythm of that descent? With every single step down, we're dropping further and further away from the pure, original truth.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the hierarchy perfectly maps out the creators and their actual relationship to ultimate reality. Right up at the top level, you've got the ideal bed, created by God. That represents absolute truth. Directly below that, the physical bed is created by the carpenter, making it just a copy of truth. And then, scraping the absolute bottom, we have the painted bed, created by the artist. So what is its relation to the truth? It's literally just a copy of a copy. The artist is out here imitating the carpenter's imitation.
Look at the stark visual contrast here. It brilliantly illustrates the vast, basically unbridgeable gap Plato saw between the divine and the artistic. You have absolute truth blazing on one side and the painted bed, this mere copy of a copy, on the other. This stark contrast hits the nail on the head regarding Plato's fundamental problem with art. The artist possesses only the appearance of knowledge, not true knowledge itself. The painter doesn't actually need to know how to build a sturdy, functional bed, right? They just need to know how to mimic the way light bounces off its surface.
Which brings us to a really important number in Plato's philosophy, 3. And we really need to emphasize this rule of 3. Through their imitation, the artist is exactly 3 steps away from reality. By the time a concept filters all the way down from the divine idea to the physical object and finally lands on the artistic representation, the true essence of that thing is almost entirely lost. It's exactly like a cosmic game of telephone, where the final message is really just an echo of an echo. All right, so with this metaphysical framework established, Plato's ready to bring the artist into the courtroom. Let's shift our focus to a more analytical tone and lay out the prosecution's case. In works like The Republic and Ion, Plato doesn't hold back. He levels 4 very specific, incredibly serious charges against poetry and drama. And make no mistake, these aren't just minor aesthetic complaints. These are heavy charges of philosophical and social sabotage. Let's go through the indictment charge by charge. Charge number 1. Poetry is an imitation of an imitation. We just saw this exact thing with the painted bed, but it totally applies to literature too. Think about a tragic playwright composing this sweeping epic drama about brave warriors and wise kings. According to Plato, that playwright likely has zero real-world knowledge of military strategy or state governance. They're merely imitating the actions and emotions associated with those roles. Because our physical world is already just a copy of the world of ideas, the poet who imitates the physical world is twice removed from the truth. They're just peddling an illusion of expertise. Honestly, it's the ancient equivalent of taking serious medical advice from an actor who plays a doctor on TV.
This brings us to charge number 2, where the problem gets deeply psychological: rational thinking versus emotional indulgence. See, Plato firmly believed that reason should be the absolute, unquestioned governing force in our lives. But what does a tragic play actually do? It makes audiences weep. It excites pity, fear, anger, and this deep sorrow over the fate of a made-up hero. Plato argued that instead of strengthening our self-control and our rational minds, this emotional indulgence just encourages irrational behavior. It actively feeds the exact part of our soul that we should be trying to subdue.
Moving on, charge number 3 focuses purely on the social impact, misleading society. Poets don't just mimic emotions, right? They tell the stories about the gods and heroes that literally shape the culture. But Plato points out a huge issue. Poets frequently present false or downright harmful ideas. Just take the great epics of Homer, for example. In those universally beloved stories, the gods are constantly deceiving each other, seeking petty revenge, and behaving totally immorally. Plato looked at this and asked, how on earth can we build a just, rational society if our citizens, especially the highly impressionable youth, are raised on stories where the highest divine authorities act like criminals? It just provides absolutely terrible moral examples.
And finally, charge number 4, encouraging illusion. Art creates appearances that seem incredibly real but are, at the end of the day, completely fabricated. A beautiful, ultra-realistic painting of a landscape might totally fool your eye, and a powerful, dramatic performance might genuinely fool your heart, but that tricks people into mistaking mere artistic appearances for genuine knowledge and reality. The danger here is pure deception. If a society embraces illusions, they inevitably abandon the rigorous, difficult pursuit of actual truth.
So, if the poets are brought up to the stand to defend themselves, how exactly does Plato describe their creative process? Well, spoiler alert, he doesn't credit them with supreme intellect. Instead, in his work Ion, Plato suggests that poets compose through what he calls divine madness. They aren't working from a place of deep, reasoned wisdom at all. They're essentially possessed. They channel beautiful words without truly understanding the profound truths they might accidentally stumble upon. Because they rely entirely on this unpredictable inspiration and madness, rather than solid logical knowledge, Plato concludes that poets are completely unreliable as teachers for the general public.
And that leads us to the final sweeping verdict in the Republic. To protect reason, to protect justice, and to firmly prevent the spread of falsehood and emotional excess, Plato argues that artists and poets must be banished from the ideal state. It is a dramatic expulsion, for sure. Now, to be fair, he wasn't entirely without mercy. He did allow one very narrow exception. Poetry that strictly promotes virtue, encourages moral behavior, and supports social harmony could stay. But anything that undermined truth, which was the vast, vast majority of dramatic and epic poetry, simply had to go.
Now you might be thinking, okay, this is incredibly strict. Why does this ancient philosophy even matter to us today? Well, the legacy of Plato's Mimesis is absolutely monumental. Even if we totally disagree with his ultimate verdict, we have to recognize that Plato was the very first person to rigorously question the relationship between art and truth. He established the idea that artists actually have a moral responsibility to society. He recognized just how powerfully literature and media can influence culture, and he basically laid the entire foundation for all the literary and artistic criticism that followed. Literally every single time we debate whether a violent movie or a controversial song is bad for society, we are having an argument that Plato started over 2,000 years ago. But of course, an argument this massive didn't just go unanswered. Let's rapidly look at the appeal, which was famously led by Plato's own star student, Aristotle. Later critics recognized the severe limitations of Plato's rigid view. Aristotle vigorously defended poetry by arguing that art is not just some cheap copy, it involves incredible creativity and imagination. Rather than just mimicking the surface of things, literature can actually educate us and reveal much deeper, universal truths about the human condition. And as for those dangerous emotions Plato was so worried about, Aristotle argued that experiencing pity and fear through art actually provides a really healthy release, a catharsis, that can educate and purify the audience rather than corrupt them. Which leaves us with this final, truly profound question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Does art reveal the truth or hide it?
Are the artists and creators you love holding up a mirror that helps you understand reality on a much deeper level, just as Aristotle suggested? Or, as Plato warned, are they simply trapping us in an entertaining, emotional illusion? 3 steps removed from reality. It's a debate that has raged like wildfire for over 2 millennia, and honestly, the answer changes every single time we open a book or look at a canvas. Keep that in mind the next time you lose yourself in a great story. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.